One of the questions I get asked all the time is, how do I start adding jazz phrases to my blues playing? Well, in today's lesson, we're going to look at a few different tools we can use to accomplish this goal. My name is Jack Roosh. Welcome to my channel. Let's get into it. So everything I play in my solos is connected to the underlying chord progression. And in the blues, there's some really great common chord substitutions we can use that will give us opportunities to use some different scales and arpeggios found in jazz. Now for today's lesson, we're just going to look at the first 4 bars of a slow blues in the key of A. I'll play down the rhythm track and then we'll break down what's happening in the chord changes. So this chord progression starts out with this A9 chord voicing. This is a really great voicing for playing blues rhythm guitar. It's also a voicing for a C sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord, but when we play A in the bass, we get all the notes of A9, the 3rd, flat 7th, 9th, and 5th. Now in measure 2, we move to a D9 chord, and then in measure 3, we're back to A. Now this is where we're going to add our first chord substitution. We're going to take this A9 chord and slide it up a half step. Now there's 2 ways I like to look at this chord. The first way is as a D minor 7 flat 5 chord. Now this opens the door to play the Locrian scale. So I'm going to play an example of a line now that I transcribed from Joe Pass using this Locrian scale. Check it out. Okay, so the second way I like to look at this chord is as an altered 5 chord. So E7 is the 5 chord in the key of A. If we look at this chord voicing as it relates to E, we have a flat 7, a major 3rd, a flat 6 or flat 13, and a flat 9 on top. So all these really great altered chord tones that opens the door to play the E altered scale. So in this next example, I'll play a line built from that scale over that chord in the progression. So that was 2 pretty cool scale ideas we can use in bar 3 of our blues. But as we move to bar 4, there's another half step chord substitution we can use. We can go a half step up from the 4 chord and play E flat 9, resolving down to D9. Now it's pretty common to just sort of let a chord movement like that pass by and kind of ignore it, but if we take a closer look at what's happening in these notes, we see that that's actually a great opportunity to use the A altered scale. So we're actually substituting this E flat 9 chord where we would normally have A7. So if we look at these notes as they relate to A, we see we have the flat 5, the flat 7, the 3rd, the flat 13, and the flat 9. So all notes from this A altered scale. So in this next example, I'm going to play a line built from the A altered scale over that chord and then resolve to notes from the D9 chord. So there's also a couple of really useful arpeggios we can use in this spot to get some of these altered chord tones. It's really common in jazz to play a diminished 7th arpeggio over a dominant chord, starting on the 3rd of the dominant chord. This is something that Grant Green uses all the time, and I love the sound of it. If we're looking at A7 and we look at the third, C sharp, we would play a C sharp diminished seventh arpeggio, which then we can resolve to notes of our D chord. So this gives us the sound of an A7 flat 9 chord. This is a really useful kind of arpeggio approach where we're still treating this like an altered A7 chord and using this arpeggio to highlight that flat 9 and then resolve. So in this next example, I'll play this arpeggio idea. Okay, so another arpeggio I like to use is one that highlights the flat 13 or the flat 6. That's this A augmented arpeggio. And we can just walk down this arpeggio and resolve right to D to highlight the sound of this flat 13, which is right in this E flat 9 chord. So I'll play an example of a line using this arpeggio right now. Check it out. Okay, so one last lick example. We can take these two arpeggios, the diminished and the augmented arpeggio, and combine them together in a line to highlight the flat 9 and the flat 13. We can play up the diminished and then down the augmented, and then we can even tie in notes from the altered scale. So in this next example, I'll tie together the two arpeggios and throw in a few notes from the altered scale to build a nice line over that whole section, moving to the D7 chord or the D9 chord. So the main point I really want to convey in this lesson is how important it is to take a closer look at the chords you're playing over. Oftentimes in a blues, these types of chromatic passing chords get overlooked and ignored. But if you take the time to analyze the notes that make up these chords, you'll realize there's all these great opportunities to play some really interesting, cool lines built right out of the chords. So even in the first 4 bars of a straightforward 12-bar blues, you've got all this great stuff you can really sink your teeth into. So the solo that I played at the beginning of this lesson, I'll have the full transcription up on my Patreon if you're interested in learning that and getting into some more of these types of lines. As always, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.